Okay, we're beginning a new chapter today, which I'm just going to introduce today, maybe a short class. And let me quickly give you a sense of what we've done so far recently and where we're going, okay? So remember, it all started out with a recession. So we have a recession. And then the question was, what can the government do to help the economy climb out of this recession? Right? And so what can the government do? The government can pursue expansionary fiscal policy, which is basically government spending going up, taxes going down. Correct? When I say government, who do I mean? I mean the president and Congress. Right? But now we are going to study the role of the Federal Reserve System, or the Federal Reserve Bank. Fed for short. In other words, what's the role of the Fed? Now we're going to learn that the Fed is in charge of something called monetary policy. And this is something that we will study in chapter 17. Right, so fiscal policy is in the hands of the government, and monetary policy is in the hands of the Fed. Okay? Now in this chapter, chapter 11 and 12 provide us with the background that we need to understand monetary policy. So that's what we're going to be doing now in the next couple of weeks. Okay? We're going to study the necessary background so as to be able to understand how the Fed works. Okay? So what is this chapter about? In this chapter we study the monetary system, and here are the objectives of this chapter. First, we will define money and describe its functions. Second, we will describe the functions of banks. Third, we will describe the functions of the Fed. And fourth, we will explain how the banking system creates money and how the Fed controls the quantity of money. So that's going to be key. The Fed controls the quantity of money. And somehow this is going to be related to the AD curve. Because remember, in a recession, we'd like to shift this curve rightwards, correct? So we're going to see how the Fed does this by changing the quantity of money in the economy. That's what the Fed does. Because the Fed does this together with our banking system. Okay? And let me now go to my drawing board. So what exactly is money? Let's start with that. So my objective today is to simply do point number 1 over there. We're going to define money, describe its functions. That's what I'm going to do today. Okay? So what exactly is money? And here I must warn you that money is not the same thing as income or wealth. These are not the same thing. Even though when you get a rise at work, you may describe this to your family as, I am now going to be making more money. Correct? That's how you may describe it. But really what you ought to be saying is that my income is going to rise. Now why do I make this distinction between money and income? That's because these existed even before the invention of money. You see, there was a time in human history when money hadn't been invented. You are aware of that, correct? Now, even back then, before money was invented, do you think there was no wealth or income? There were. Even back then, in those prehistoric times, kings and tribal chiefs and so on, and these were, in those days, wealthy individuals. Am I correct? It's just that their wealth took the form of, let's say, heads of sheep or heads of cattle or land. Do you follow me? Right? So one can be wealthy without money having been invented. Now, what about income? Back in those days, in pre-money times, income took the form of some type of produce. Right? If you were a farmer, your income took the form of the grain that you were growing. Right? If you were a shepherd, your income may take the form of bags of wool. Right? So my point is that money and income and wealth are separate things. It just so happens that we measure income and wealth in terms of money in modern times. So money is simply a way of measuring income and wealth, but income and wealth exist independently of money. So what exactly is money then? The important thing to note is money is a human invention. And what exactly is it? It's typically defined as a good or token accepted as a means of payment and in the repayment of debt. I'm going to replace the word good here with commodity. So it's a commodity or token. Now, what's the distinction between commodity and token? What's the difference between commodity and token? A commodity is something that is on its own useful. For instance, rice is a commodity. Now you can think of an economy where money takes the form of bags of rice. So rice is money. You can think of an economy like that. Am I correct? Perhaps there were economies like that in the past, where some kind of grain took the form of money. Right? But these days, we use tokens. Now, what's a token? In our case, the tokens that we use are coins and currency. Now, these things are not intrinsically valuable. You can't do anything else with them. Currency, in particular, is just a piece of paper, worthless on its own, right? Unlike rice, right? So the point here is that your money, the object that you choose as money, could be a commodity, which means that it is useful on its own. You can eat it, for instance, or it could be a token, which is useless on its own. That's the distinction, correct? So the point is we choose something to be money, whether it's a commodity or a token. And what is this money? It is commonly accepted as a means of payment. In other words, you can buy things with it. The seller will accept it as a form of payment. Also, if you owe somebody money, or you shouldn't use the word money, but if you are in debt to somebody, then you can repay the debt in the form of money. Right, so this is our definition of money. The important point to remember is this is simply a human invention, not intrinsically valuable. Now, why was money invented is the next question. Why was money invented? Why do human beings invent things? Why do humans invent things? We've invented all kinds of things. Why? To make life easier for us in some way, correct? So how does money make life easier for us is the question. Why did we invent money? Because clearly there was a time in human history when money hadn't been invented. And when money hadn't been invented, how did we go around buying and selling things? We used to barter. Is that correct? We used to engage in a direct exchange, which is called bartering. Right? Now remember that human beings have always engaged in trade. We've always exchanged things. And why is that? Because we found out pretty early on that there were benefits to specialization. People began to specialize pretty early on in human history because people realized that each person had some type of comparative advantage. Do you remember the term comparative advantage? So people began to realize that it was best for them to specialize in the lines of production in which they had a comparative advantage. Of course, when you specialize, you have to trade, right? Because you don't live on just that one good that you specialize in. You need other things to live, right? So when you specialize, you have to be able to trade. In other words, trade permits specialization. Excuse me. So the point I was saying is that trade permits specialization, correct? And in those days, we had to trade by the means of bartering with each other before money was invented. Now, what was the problem with this type of bartering? What was the problem with bartering? The problem with bartering is called the problem of the double coincidence of wants. Problem of the double coincidence of wants. Now, what exactly does this mean? Let me explain this to you. Let's say that you are a person growing wheat. You're a specialist in wheat, right? However, you realize that you can't live on wheat alone. You need other things to live, and so you want to exchange some of your wheat for, let us say, meat. So you'd like to trade your wheat for meat. How do you do this in the old days? Or how did someone like you do this before money was invented? You would have to carry a sack of wheat on your back, right? And you'd need to go looking for someone carrying what on his back? Meat, correct? So you find someone who is carrying meat on his back and you think you're done. You go up to him and say, hey, you have what I need. But then he looks at the sack on your back and he says, I'm afraid you don't have what I need. Am I correct? He has the beef or the meat that you need, but you're selling wheat, and he doesn't want wheat. He's looking for corn. Can you trade? You can't. Am I correct? So this is the problem of the double coincidence of wants. In other words, in order to have a successful trade, there are two criteria that your trading partner must meet. There are two criteria that he must meet. And what are these criteria? First, he must be selling what you need. Second, he must be wanting to buy what you are selling. That's the double coincidence. There has to be an exact match, in other words. Right? He has to be selling what you want, and you must be selling what he wants. Only then can you trade. This is going to be a problem. So you need to look around for a guy with meat on his back who also wants wheat. And this is no easy task. You might have to travel quite far and wide to find such a person. This was the problem with the barter economy, right? So to put it in a diagram, it's like this. You have this transaction. This transaction is really two transactions. And one transaction is you selling wheat. That's one transaction. The other transaction is you buying meat. Correct? But in the days of the barter economy, both these transactions are combined into a single one. They are a single transaction. Am I correct? And that's the problem. That's why we have this problem of the double coincidence of ones. So how does the invention of money help us to basically separate these two transactions? That's what money does, you see. Instead of forcibly combining these two transactions, what money does is money enables you to actually break up this into its two parts. And I'll tell you how that works. Once money has been invented, and let's say money takes the form of some variety of seashells. Okay? We're talking about some primitive people, and they use seashells, a kind of seashells as money. So now you have a bag of wheat on your back, and you're basically going around saying, I have wheat on my back. Does anyone want to buy my wheat? You see a guy out there, and this guy is carrying on his back apples. Now, ordinarily, you couldn't trade with him because he's not selling what you want, correct? But he wants to buy your wheat. No problem now. You can sell him your wheat, and he gives you money, correct? In the old days, you couldn't trade with him, right? But now you can. He wants what you're selling. That's all that's needed. And so you sell him your wheat. He gives you a bunch of seashells, money, right? So you're done then with your transaction, which is this one. You're done with that. And now with the money in your pocket, you simply go around looking for someone carrying what on his back? Meat on his back, correct? The first guy you meet who is carrying meat on his back, you stop him, you ask him for the meat, you pay with that money. Am I correct? So this has made life easy. You don't have to look for an exact match anymore, right? You have broken up the two transactions which were forcibly combined into one in the days of the barter economy. You have managed to break them up into its two components, separated them. That's what makes life easy, right? So what money does is that money enables us to get around the problem of the double coincidence ones of a barter economy. So this is why we invented money. That's how it makes life easy for us, and that's why we invented it. Correct? So what then are the main functions of money? Here are the three vital functions of money. And the first one is what we have just been talking about, money as a medium of exchange. In other words, money facilitates economic transactions. Money makes it easy for us to trade with each other because it helps us get around the problem of the double coincidence of wants of barter economies. Right? So that's the main reason why money was invented. That's the main function of money, to facilitate economic transactions. The second function of money is money as a unit of account. What that means is you can use money to measure various economic entities. You can use money to measure, as I said, income, wealth, prices, cost, profit, revenues. All kinds of economic entities now are measured in the form of money. So just as we use degrees Celsius or degrees Fahrenheit to measure temperature, we use money to measure all of these economic financial entities. So that's money as a unit of account. We now have a third function of money also, and that is called money as a store of value. Now, what's a store of value? It says here, a store of value is any commodity or token that can be held and exchanged later for goods and services. Now that's important. You can use it to buy things later. This means that you can use money as a means of accumulating wealth, because that's what wealth is. What is wealth? Wealth comes from you putting aside a part of your current income to spend later. Is that correct? So if you have a certain income today, you decide to put away a part of it, keep it away, put it in the bank, for instance. And why are you doing this? So that you can spend it later. So that's what a store of value does. Correct? It enables you to save, to accumulate wealth. Now, money has been often a store of value. People have used this token or commodity as a means of accumulating wealth. Correct? However, this is not unique to money. This is a function. This function isn't unique to money. Other commodities could also serve as stores of value, such as you can use diamonds, for instance, jewelry as a form of wealth. Correct? Land could be a form of wealth. Right? Paintings by Picasso could be used as a way of storing wealth. Am I correct? So wealth can be accumulated in a variety of forms. It needn't be money, right? So money as a store of value is not a unique function. Is not unique to money. Other commodities can serve as stores of value also. But the first two, medium of exchange, unit of account, these are functions that are in fact unique to money. So these are the three functions of money, of which function number one, medium of exchange, well, that's the most important function. That's why money was invented. Now, in order for money to perform these three functions, it must have certain properties. So we are talking now about physical properties. This thing that you have chosen to be money. And this thing that you have chosen to be money has been quite varied in human history. Right? All kinds of things have been used as money by mankind, from seashells to seeds of some exotic plants, and later on, coins made of metal, right? And now in modern times, paper money. Am I correct? So we've used all kinds of things as money in our history. Whatever we've chosen as money, the thing that we've chosen as money, usually had certain properties, certain physical properties. So what are these properties that enable money then to fulfill its three functions of store of value, unit of account, and medium of exchange? And here are the desired physical properties of money. First is portability. Money must be portable, or else how would it serve as a medium of exchange? You need to be able to carry it around with you to go shopping, in other words, because money was invented in order to make shopping easy. Am I correct? Remember, money was invented to get around that problem of the double coincidence of wants of barter economies. So in order for money to fulfill this function, it has to be, ideally, something that people can carry around with them. Okay? And let me give you a little example here. There is a certain Pacific island inhabited by certain native peoples. And these people, their money takes the form of these huge stone wheels, carved stone wheels, which weigh many tons. So how do they manage that? This is something that is clearly not portable, and yet it is money. The way they do it is that, those stone wheels, they remain exactly where they are. Nobody can steal them, move them, or anything, right? So when a person goes shopping, all he does is he transfers the ownership of those wheels to other people. So you can think of the title deed to those wheels changing hands, but the wheels themselves remain where they are. Clearly, this is not very convenient. Now, this works for that Pacific island because no one really leaves that small island. Everyone just lives there. But if one of these guys wanted to, let's say, emigrate to the US, carrying their wealth with them, that would be very difficult for them. Am I correct? Right? It works for this small society because it's a very insular, small society. No one leaves there. Everyone knows each other in some sense. So they can use these big, immovable stone wheels as money. Right? But ideally, we'd like money to be something that is portable. The second desirable property of money is that it must be divisible. Now, what do I mean by that? In other words, you have to be able to cut it up into small bits easily. And let me explain why this is important. Now, this is important from the point of view of money acting as a medium of exchange as well as a unit of account. Let me explain. Let's say that money took the form of gold bars about the size of this eraser. If money took the form of these big gold bars this size, and you wanted to go shopping in Walmart, you'd have to carry one of these things with you, correct? And then when you come to the cashier, she will ring you up and say that you owe 2 ounces of gold. But you have this big bar of gold. Right? How are you going to take out 2 ounces of gold from this bar of gold to pay? You follow me? You would have to pull out a pair of weighing scales, a chisel and a hammer, and perhaps chisel out a bit of gold, weigh it on those scales to see that you have 2 ounces, and then pay. Now, wouldn't that be very inconvenient? Am I correct? So it's nice to have money that is already broken up into little bits. Money ought to be divisible, in other words, correct? To be a convenient medium of exchange. Now, what about store of value? If we measured money in the form of these large gold bars, how would we measure, let's say, your hourly wage? Your hourly wage is $10 an hour, say. Right? And in terms of this gold bar, what fraction of this gold bar would that $10 be? A very teeny fraction. I'm just making this up, 1/500th of this gold bar, say. Right, now that's a very inconvenient way of expressing your wage. If I asked you what's your hourly wage, you're going to say 1/499th of a gold bar. Right? If you get a raise at work tomorrow, you'd say, I've got a raise. I've gone from 1/499th of a gold bar to 1/450th of a gold bar. Not very convenient, correct? So once again, in order for money to serve as a unit of account, in order for money to measure these economic financial entities, money ought to be something that is divisible, that can be broken up into small bits. Correct? The third desirable property of money is that it should be durable. It should be something that doesn't spoil. Otherwise, it would not be able to serve as a store of value. If money spoils easily, then you can't use it to accumulate wealth. Correct? Which is why mankind seized upon gold very early on in our history. We chose gold as money. Do you know why? Well, because gold has this one desirable property, is that it is exceedingly durable. It never rusts, for instance. Gold never oxidizes. Silver can. Copper can. Copper turns green, for instance. Right? But gold never rusts, which is perhaps one reason why mankind, looked to gold as money, because it was a very good store of value. Now, let me ask you a question here that you may find interesting. Is that, can you name me a certain commodity that serves as money even today in many prisons and used to serve as money in POW camps, prisoner of war camps in World War II? A certain commodity that even today serves as money. People in prisons, often use it as currency. Any thoughts? The commodity in question is cigarettes. Right? Now, if you think about it, cigarettes actually have all of these three properties. They are portable. Back in the days of the Second World War, when lots of people smoked filter-less cigarettes, they were divisible also. You could simply snip them in half, for instance, and both sides were equivalent. Right? And they were also durable as long as you kept them in a dry place. Right? So it's not surprising that cigarettes have often served as money. Now, before I get into this, I am going to talk about the history of paper money in the banking system. So what's the history of paper money? And that's the last thing that I will do today. So what is the history of currency? How did we go from using coins to using paper money? How did that come about? And it's quite an interesting story. It all starts with merchants, European merchants, a long time ago. Okay? Now these guys used to trade extensively with countries in the East. There was, for instance, a very lucrative trade in silk and spices with countries in the East, right? Now, these European merchants would have to travel eastwards, carrying with them a lot of money. In those days, money took the form of gold coins, silver coins, etc. So these European merchants had to carry a lot of money with them, travel eastwards, right? Arrive in, let's say, India, buy up a bunch of spices in India, and then ship those spices back to Europe, selling them at enormous profit. This is how these guys made their money, right? But there was a risk with this, and the risk was that when these guys traveled eastwards, either by ship or by road, carrying all that money with them, they often got robbed on the way, right? If they were traveling by road, they might be held up by robbers. If they were going by ship, they might be held up by pirates, right? So there was this risk that they would lose the money even before they arrived in India to buy the spices. So they decided on a way to solve that problem, to get rid of that risk. And this is how they did it. Even before leaving on their journey, the merchant would go to his local goldsmith. 'Cause, 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 'c Now this local goldsmith in the merchant's hometown, now this is a guy who, since he worked with precious metals all the time, usually had a fortified home and he had secure facilities for storing gold because he dealt with gold all the time. Am I correct? So this goldsmith was somebody who typically had gold lying around at home. So he perhaps had a nice thick safe in which he stored his gold. Right? So the merchant, before leaving on his journey, comes to the goldsmith with his bag of gold and deposits the gold with the goldsmith. Correct? The goldsmith writes out a receipt. And the receipt simply is a piece of paper which states that the bearer of that piece of paper can come to him, the goldsmith, at any time to collect the 1,000 gold coins. Correct? So this is what the merchant does. He takes his 1,000 gold coins to the goldsmith, deposits it with the goldsmith. The goldsmith writes him out a receipt. But you may ask, this merchant is about to set off for India to buy spices. How is he going to buy spices in India without his gold? You see, the merchant sets off on his journey carrying with him only the goldsmith receipt. Now, if he is held up by a robber or a pirate on his journey, there is no gold on him. All he has is that piece of paper. Now, the pirate who holds him up is likely illiterate. Very few people knew how to read and write those days. So he would look at this piece of paper and think it was worthless. Right? Even if he could read, and he realized that this paper could be or rather you could take this paper to the goldsmith and get gold. And let's say the robber or pirate takes that receipt from the merchant. Well, that's not so bad because the merchant can quickly relay a message to the goldsmith saying that if this guy with a mustache and earrings comes to you to collect gold, please have him arrested. Am I correct? So this was a safe way to go then, because this merchant would now not lose his gold. All he's carrying with him is a piece of paper. However, there remains the question, how is he going to buy spices in India without any gold? All he's carrying is a piece of paper, right? But this is how it worked. When he arrived in India, he could, in fact, buy spices using that goldsmith receipt. He could simply give that goldsmith receipt to the merchant at that end. And the merchant at that end in India would happily accept that piece of paper, knowing full well that it was backed by gold lying with that goldsmith in Europe. Do you follow me? Of course, in order for all of this to work, there has to be trust. Because I could come to you and give you a piece of paper saying this is backed by gold, but what if it isn't? Do you follow me? So there has to be trust in this system, clearly. So oftentimes, the way this trust was built up was that all of this trade took place within people of the same faith. For instance, Jewish merchants. Jewish merchants were extremely successful in this type of trade. They only dealt with each other. Am I correct? And since they were the same faith, they could trust each other. Right? So in other words, the merchant goes to India, buys spices, pays with what? With that piece of paper. Now, the merchant in India who accepts this piece of paper, is he going to make a run for Europe to collect the gold from the goldsmith? He's not going to bother either, because when time comes for him to buy something from somebody else, he too simply passes on that piece of paper. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, people in India seem to accept that piece of paper as money because it is backed by gold. Right? Now, what does that make that piece of paper? It makes that piece of paper the first currency, first paper money. So that's how paper money came about. These were originally goldsmith receipts. Correct? Now, what about the history of banking, which is very closely tied to the history of paper money? Let's now go back to Europe to the goldsmith. This goldsmith has a lot of other people's gold. Correct? Now, this doesn't belong to him, of course. People to whom he has written out these receipts, and people who have then passed on those receipts to yet other people, can come to him to claim gold. Am I correct? It is possible that at any day, people will come carrying his receipts to him to claim gold. So he can't really do anything with that gold. That's not his gold. It belongs to other people. But he realizes now that very few people actually come to him to claim their gold. Very few people actually come to him to claim their gold because people can simply use his receipts as money. So why bother to claim the gold when you can pay for whatever it is that you want to buy using those receipts themselves? Do you follow me? So he realizes very few people come to him to claim their gold. So he sees an opportunity for himself here. And what is that opportunity? He can't really spend that gold. It is not his gold. Am I correct? Because whoever has receipts could come any day and claim gold. It just so happens that they don't come often, but sometimes they do. So what is this opportunity that he sees for himself? Other people's money lying with him. What can he do with that money to make money for himself? He can lend out this money and earn interest. This is the opportunity that he sees for himself. You see, he can take this money or some of it and he can lend it out and charge interest. Now, how does he lend out money? Let's say somebody comes to the goldsmith to borrow 10 gold coins. Will this goldsmith actually go and grab 10 gold coins from his pile of gold and give it to the borrower? He may not do that because now he knows that his receipts are in fact as good as money. So all he will do then is he will write out a receipt saying that the owner of this receipt can come to me at any time to claim 10 gold coins. And he will give that piece of paper to the borrower. Right? But when he starts to do this, he runs a risk, and that is, now he has written out receipts for more gold coins than are lying with him. Am I correct? When he starts lending in this fashion, he has now written out more receipts for gold coins than he has gold coins with him. So the risk he runs is that if everyone in possession of his receipts comes to him on the same day to claim their gold coins, he will not have enough gold coins to pay out. Is that understood? But the risk of this happening is very low. It's very unlikely that everyone who has his receipts will come on the same day to claim their gold. It's very unlikely. So what does this make this goldsmith? This goldsmith, in fact, is an early bank. Right? So this is how the banking system began. So we've discussed the history of paper money and the history of the banking system. We will stop here today.